Good morning. This is MotivationU, the podcast. Welcome to MotivationU, the podcast. My name is Bob Ganzak. I'll be introducing our guest here in a moment. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast Room here at Celebration Point. If you've not been to Spurrier's, this is some place that you really need to come. Not only the food, the atmosphere, the people you're going to see, the museum. There is a college football museum, my own personal opinion. It's probably a subpar level of what we have here at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill because this is a real deal. And you might even see Coach, the old ball coach, walking around here and when you're here. So there's a lot of celebrities, a lot of people, just awesome food. So make sure you get an opportunity to come here. Of course, this podcast is about leadership, and we're going to get into that and find another individual's journey to leadership. We do have some Dale Carnegie classes going on. We have one right now going on in Lake City. We're in week 8 of the one here in Gainesville. I believe it's April 6th is the next one that starts in Jacksonville. So if you're interested, if you're in the Jacksonville area, make sure you look that up. You can find us at jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, and we're filling that class up, so would love to have you be a part of it. The next Gainesville class will be coming in mid-May. I should have that on the website, maybe by the end of the day, probably by tomorrow at least. So that's where we are right now as far as Dale Carnegie is concerned, and getting our programs out there, getting people involved. We have 20-some people that will graduate next Tuesday night, and we had an inspirational evening like we hadn't had one before the other evening. So it's really, really something that you want to partake in, and it's so much fun to live in a community or be a part of a community where people are interested in developing themselves. As I was walking in today, Josh Vaughn, a local entrepreneur, stopped me and we had a short conversation, one of our graduates, and won the highest award of achievement in his program. But it's just nice to hear the successes people are having in their lives and how much of the credit they give to the Dale Carnegie program. Now, don't get me wrong. Josh Vaughn is successful because of sweat equity. The gentleman works his tail off. Yet, when you listen to him talk about the things that he learned that took him to the next level, that's really what the program is all about. Right now, I'm working with a group of healthcare professionals from HCA Florida, Lake City Hospital. We have 16 leaders from the hospital in that program right now, and it is so much fun just to watch them grow even after week 2. So my guest today, somebody that I have really wanted to bring into this podcast since I met her. Daisy, when did we meet? About a year and a half ago? About a year and a half ago. This is Daisy Frias. She is the Chief Operating Officer, Administrator for North Florida Pediatrics, a pediatric firm that's based out of Lake City but has offices throughout Florida. And just wonderful people. I've been able to work with Dr. Sam and Dr. Pam now like I said, 10, 11 years since I first met them. And just have watched the company grow. And when they hired you, I saw a turn. You know, I saw a turn. Dr. Sam has had some wonderful people work for him over the years. Just really, really really good people that I really enjoy and have become good friends with. Yet when they hired you, it was like a turning point. And I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
So Daisy, let's talk about your leadership journey. One of my thoughts on leadership is that you don't have to have the last name of, you know, Gates or Buffett or whatever it is to be a great leader. That some of our best leaders are, you know, are living next door to us. People that are making an impact on people's lives. And you have 140, 145 employees at North Florida Pediatrics, and you impact all of those individuals. Where did life start for Daisy Frias?
So I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Spent a couple years there until my father joined the military. And then from there we traveled to different places, mainly Texas, and then eventually ended up in Europe. So was raised in Hanau, Frankfurt, on the base called Spring Hill. If it's still there, I'm not sure. Probably spent until about 9th grade in Europe. Spent 1 year between Europe and Puerto Rico, and then I eventually came here to Gainesville, Florida, and graduated from Buchholz High School. And from there, I joined Santa Fe Community College at the moment, or at that time, and got my associates from there. And then I continued to St. Leo University. I did a bachelor's in healthcare management with a minor in human resources. And from there, I completed my MBA with St. Leo University as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. How did you get to Gainesville, from Germany to Gainesville? What was the element that brought the family here?
My mother actually has a really good friend. They were raised together, so pretty much like sisters. She was here, still is here, and that's kind of why we ended up in Gainesville.
So Gainesville is kind
having
of
that support for my mom,
home for you.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Even though you're up in Columbia County now and the Lake City area. So those early years, Daisy, I love your leadership style, and we'll get to that as we go through this podcast. But what were some of the first foundational things that were taught to you either by your parents or other individuals that influenced the early stages of your leadership?
So I would say definitely the military and the lifestyle probably has a lot to do with it. My father was strict, but not to the point where we didn't get to have fun and things like that. I think the military kind of formulates that within a military brat, typically what I would be called. And then from there, I did move out at a very young age after my mom and my dad separated. So I was about 15, turning 16. When I moved out, I was actually attending Buchholz High School. I was that was my entire high school career was there at Buchholz. I would say that aside from family, my father and my mother, the first individual that really had an impact on me was my Spanish teacher.
Oh, wow.
At Buchholz, her name is Miss Gregory. And she kind of pushed me to really finish high school, focus on what's necessary. I worked at Las Margaritas, actually, for quite many years. So the owner of Las Margaritas was also very influential to me. Also pushed me to make sure, if I needed to get to work for whatever reason, and even if I took 3 buses and I was there late, he would make sure that I got home safely. I was young, right? So I would say those 2 individuals definitely throughout my high school. time were probably the most influential for me.
So they influenced you a lot. What was about their leadership style? Take Miss Gregory, for example. What was about her that made you feel comfortable?
So she was stern, but she would still really speak to me, even if privately. She would ask me, Daisy, what's going on? I see that you're not as focused and things like that. So eventually I kind of broke it to her and told her, exactly where I was in life, even though I was so young. I had her for all 4 years. So I went all the way to AP Spanish, and she was my teacher. But she was compassionate. She understood what I was going through, but she held me accountable, right? So although I didn't live with my parents, I did still have individuals holding me accountable. The same thing with our bird about Las Margaritas. You have to make it to work on time.
Yeah.
I worked there from 3 p.m. to about 10 or 11 p.m. So at this point, Las Margaritas was over on 43rd Street behind the Saxby. So I could actually walk from Buchholz over to Las Margaritas. So that was my first true employment. And they made it home for me, They made sure I ate. They made sure, his sister Carmina was amazing, kind of like a second mom. So when I do visit Las Margaritas and I see them, it's like seeing family all over again.
Do you have siblings?
I do, actually. I have quite a few.
Okay.
So my oldest sister, Dane, she lives over in Savannah, Georgia. And then I have my little brother, Pedro. He's actually in the military, so he's stationed up in Washington. And then we have my little sister, whose name is Xiomara. She's in Puerto Rico. And then, in addition, my father remarried, and I have Christian, Sebastian, and Sophia.
Oh, wow.
And they're on their teens, so I believe Christian now is about 15, turning 16. Sebastian about a year younger, and Sophia is probably about 10, 11 now.
When you left home, your immediate siblings, what did they stay there, or did they leave, or?
So my sister had already moved out when I left home, and then my brother stayed with my mom, and then eventually they moved from Gainesville to Orlando, and I stayed.
That's amazing. So, what did you learn from that time on your own at such a young age? What were the things that that guided you, other than the individuals? What was inside of Daisy that guided you to push yourself?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
That's all right.
I would like to say that, seeing all the struggles that we went through as a family probably made me focus a lot on making sure I did what was right. I would typically have my brother visit for the summer and things like that. So I took on a lot of responsibility young, but I think, I don't know if it was because I was raised in the military family or, what, maybe just having that presence that helped. But I don't know. I would like to say it was a combination of those around me. I got lucky.
We all kind of get lucky. Although I think when you really look at it, there's a lot of intestinal fortitude that goes along with luck.
Yeah.
In sports, the definition I always heard of luck was when preparation meets opportunity. And then people say you're lucky. I've talked a lot to my son about that, from the standpoint that, when you have a success, everybody wants to jump on your bandwagon, and they don't see the 10 years, the 12 years, the 15 years of work and effort that went into that. All they see is, oh, look, he's successful, she's successful. They don't see the grind behind it. And I'm sure there was a lot of grind in your world. What was it like at Puerto Rico? What are some of the things that you've kept from that from that part of your life, being born there and such a beautiful place?
So I can tell you when went back in June, this past June, and took my daughter to meet my immediate family. We traveled with my father, and going back in June, then you realize all the things that you've forgotten about, you know, between the smell and the food and, you know, the family, the dialect, the just so much that goes into it. I think for me, you know, we took buses everywhere. Growing up, even when me and my sister, we moved there with my mom, later on, we would take a bus, you know, one or two buses to school. And when it rains in Puerto Rico, it floods, right? So that meant that we got on the bus soaked, and the bus was probably like 60 degrees. So me and my sister will get clothes and shrivel together, you know, and, you know, we were really cold. But just the neighborhoods that we came up in, you know, seeing where my mom and my dad came from and wanting to provide more, you know, long term, like they attempted and did for us. It's kind of like what keeps me kind of going.
When I became a Dale Carnegie instructor back in 2011, I think it was, one of the gentlemen that I went through the program was an attorney from San Juan, Jose Alvarado. I always remember Jose, but he became an instructor also so that he could work, you know, teaching the Dale Carnegie programs there. And just, we spent 2 weeks together in St. Louis, you know, so we got to know each other really well, you know, talking back and forth. But just to hear him, I mean, he just bubbles about the you know, just the ambiance that is there. What was it like to move away, or have you moved back there? Did you say you moved back there for a short period of time?
Yes, for about a year we moved back. I love it. You know, even when we went back in June, it's a different feeling when you're, you know, flying in. You're like, oh my God, we're home. You know, it's that homey feeling. And then just seeing the people around you, you know, and so much, there's joy, you know what I mean? There's, you see the development that has happened since, you know, and as an adult, when you're looking at it, you're wondering, were there this many pharmacies when I was growing up, you know, so that you kind of start, you experience it in a different level, you know what I mean? You remember more. Right, and I mean, one of the things that we love to do, which I did when I was there, and try to show Zoe, is, you know, catching lizards and iguanas.
The lizards I'm okay with. Those iguanas get a little too big
well,
for
the
me.
baby iguanas, not the large iguanas. But yes, in general, just it's just different. It smells different, you know. The ambiance, like you say, it's different, and I think it's for individuals like me that were born and raised there for quite a few years and then move away, when you come back, it really does feel like you're back home.
Yeah, I don't remember any of the exact dishes, but I do remember when I was there, I absolutely loved the food.
Yes.
You know, the food was just absolutely, I don't know how you would describe it. If it was, what do you call the type of cuisine it is, because you know, you're eating, it was just absolutely wonderful, you know. I just loved it. Was it like, what are some of your favorite dishes that you miss?
I don't know how I would say them in English.
Go ahead, say them in whatever.
I remember growing up with arroz con salchichas, which is little Vienna sausages, and it's placed in the rice. The rice is like reddish, you know, you have the seasoning, you have the sofrito that they put in. And then coming home from school, there's always empanadilla ready for us. So it's like stuffed with either chicken, beef, or it's like an empanada, right? But then there's also very homey foods for me that may be a little strange for others, but I know that for me and my father and my sister, when we travel, you know, octopus salad off of the beach is something that we really enjoy. Hard to find over in the United States for it to be cooked that way. There's a food called morcilla, which is typically known as blood sausage, and then guajo that we really enjoy. While we were there, we roasted an entire pig, you know, so just kind of those traditional
Yeah.
items that
Yeah.
you don't really get to do or find here. But yeah, I mean, ganepas, you know, I don't know what you would call them in English at all, so I won't attempt to figure that out. But it's like a little green fruit, and it's very sweet on the inside. Just learning to even focus on how to eat that as a child, because it could easily be choked on.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, you know, just wanting to go out. I know we had a day where we went out and we purchased everything that we wanted to eat and we brought it back. It was actually on the day we celebrated my father's birthday. So we were just grubbing all day.
I still you mentioned two things: the beach and flying in. I still remember at the airport how you can be on the beach and that plane almost lands on top of you. I mean, it is like just feet above you when it comes in, because you're on the beach and the runway starts like almost in the water.
Yeah.
It's incredible. How did you pick healthcare? What drove you to healthcare? With a military dad, what drove you to healthcare as your?
So originally I wanted to go to school for food science. I don't know why. So that was kind of what I was focusing my associates on. But then, you know, just having grandparents in Puerto Rico that maybe weren't able to take care of themselves as often when we visited and things like that, that made me want to really care for people. So I got into healthcare. I had a friend who was a CNA, certified nursing assistant, and I wanted to find a way to kind of give back, you know, or I had a lot of different jobs in high school and when I was going to college. So I did waitressing. I worked at a bank as a teller. I cleaned apartments. I did night auditing at hotels. So I had so many different jobs that I had to take on in order to accommodate not only my high school schedule, but I mean, for Las Margaritas, I kind of did that my entire high school career. Mm-hmm. But for college, you know, you have classes in the morning, you have classes midday, you have classes in the afternoon, and wanted something more consistent that I could kind of work around with. So she had recommended me becoming a CNA. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. When I was visiting my mother in Orlando, I went ahead and did the week program. And from there, another person that's very important in my, and the person I am in leadership, she hired me as a CNA. Her name is Kelly Kilpin. She owned, at that point in time, I believe 3 assisted living facilities, and she gave me my first CNA job.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of like how I got into healthcare, just finding a different way to give back. I thought that nursing was my route until I took anatomy and physiology, and I was like, this isn't for me. But I wanted to still be in healthcare, so I told myself, let me focus on something that makes sure that those individuals providing the care are providing it properly. So that's how I ended up in operations.
That's interesting. Now, the CNA, I mean, how do I say this? A lot of people look at CNAs and look down their nose at them because, which is totally wrong. The jobs they have to do are just like absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. What are some of the values that you carry from those days as being a CNA?
I would say compassion, empathy. So as a CNA, I worked for not only assisted living facilities, but home care agencies, nursing homes. And, you know, there's one particular memory that I have, and I was actually sitting. It wasn't really a job where you had to, you know, do all the acts of daily living. But I was actually at UF at Chance Hospital with an older gentleman, and his family lived in Miami, and I was pretty much there for compassion because he was passing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he would ask me, is my family coming? You know, and I would call the family to see when they were to make it. And, you know, he passed away before the family was able to make it in. And just those feelings of, you know, the family even thanking you, I thank you for being there, for not leaving. Some people cannot take people passing. So a lot of times you would go through like different CNAs or nurses that didn't want to stay. But just, you know, little things like that, that kind of, and then you build relationships with them. You know, when I worked with Kelly, I was taking care of a older lady named Pauline, and you learn their history, the stories, you know, where they've come from, and you learn to appreciate that eventually we all make it there, and that, you know, life isn't necessarily guaranteed, and that you just have to be compassionate for everyone around you. So I would say that that's probably what makes me sit back and look at what another individual might be going through. So I try to look at both sides.
Yeah.
Just because I think I would say compassion. Yeah.
We're talking leadership with Daisy Frias, who is with North Florida Pediatrics, a large pediatric firm that is based out of Lake City, Florida, but offices throughout upper north and north central, northeast Florida. And you know, going back to the CNAs, they tend to get the dirty jobs.
Yes.
You know, and where, you know, the doctors, to a little bit lesser degree, the nurses, they sometimes get the glory, and those individuals are the ones that really, really get to know the families, you know, because they're the ones that are doing the things that are most like interactive with the patient. How many, or in your organization, do the CNAs have a desire to move into nursing, or do they find a place where they just are happy to be?
It's a combination. I would say that a lot of individuals or nurses go into CNA just so that they can start having some type of experience. From there, they'll get their CMA, which is a medical assistant. There's a little bit, there's guidelines that you have to follow as to what a CNA and a CMA can do. And from there, you know, some will go directly into an LPN program and then an RN program, or some will apply for an RN program or nursing school and then go from there. So I think it really just depends on the drive that that person has. I do know CNAs who just enjoy what they do and they don't wish to do nursing, right? But then there's a lot that look at that as a possibility, which is why a lot go into the CNA program.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My wife is a nurse, and she, in all, you know, the 17 years that we've been together, I've never heard her talk down about CNAs. I mean, she's always supportive of those individuals because of how important they are to her role, you know, as a nurse. But, you know, the world is, like you said, everybody goes through and passes on. What is it like for CNAs in the pediatric world? You know, the differences, we know, you know, some of the challenges that people have as they get into their 80s and 90s and they're at the end of their journey. What is it like for a CNA in the pediatric world?
So it depends on what healthcare portion that you're working in, right? So then, for example, there are CNAs that work from home care, right? And if you work for home care, typically for pediatrics, that means that the child has many needs, feeding tubes, et cetera, right? And usually the nerds are there to kind of help with the cleaning or depending on the insurance, because it all kind of ties back to what the insurance provides or what the parent can afford. But there are times where you'll have a CNA that's in home with the patient. On our end, on the outpatient area, a CNA has just as much as a CMA can do. You can work up the patient, do vaccinations. There's so many different things that you can learn in the outpatient portion of pediatrics. And of course, then you have the nursing, the hospital, right? So you have
Right.
CNAs that work in the hospital. So let's say there's a child who's admitted, or a child who may have cancer, and there might be a CNA that comes in for comforting, whether it's reading a book or helping them get dressed, things like that, so that the parents are either getting rest or maybe at work. There's that companion.
That's good. We're going to take a quick break here and
Okay.
come back and jump into a little bit of what your role is, your MBA and how that applied. But we'll touch with that after these breaks. So you're listening to Motivation U, the podcast.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Jeffrey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm joining the band, of course. Since Meldon Law is the official law firm partner of the Florida Gators, I want to help.
Dad, we're litigators. Let's stick to helping people in the courtroom.
Well, can we still hang out and jam a little bit? At Meldon Law, we won't back down.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to Motivation U, the podcast. My name is Bob Ganzak. With me today is Daisy Frias. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the coach's podcast room. You know, you can rent this room. You can rent this room and have your meal in here. Sometime get Dr. Sam and Dr. Pam to say, hey, let's rent this room and have a little, and you can't hear anything.
Okay.
It's soundproof, you know. I always worry about the GoPro camera up there in the corner, though. I'm concerned about that all the time. And that's Jared, our producer's camera, I have just been told. But this is just a fantastic place to be. And entire Celebration Point, as it's growing and growing, and the job that Svein Dirkelbotten and his entire team has done from Viking to develop this area, that we have a place like this. If you're traveling up and down I-75, it's exit 384. If you want a great experience, either shopping or dining, come by Celebration Point. And more to the point, stop by Spurrier's. It's a great place. I've had a lot of friends of mine that are from Michigan that were sports fans like myself, and they're making their trek down to Naples or even Miami or the Keys, and they've stopped here. And they've told me, Bob, thank you. This is just an awesome place to go. Take the tour, look at all the trophies, the helmets on the wall, and watch some of the videos that go on while you're eating, because you'll see some pictures and things that you won't see anyplace else, just here at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Daisy, we took your journey all the way up to basically your schooling. What made you want to go get your MBA? Where did you get that from, and why did you take that route?
So I've always been very motivated. I would say I always have to be doing something. So after I finished my bachelor's, I worked a little bit, actually moved away to New York, and worked there it was kind of that, oh, I'm done with school, I'm going to go live in the big city. And while I was there, I did some volunteering at NYU for an Alzheimer's study. And I told myself, you know, if I don't do it now, I probably will never go back and do it. So I finished my undergrad and then decided to just go ahead and do an MBA.
And where did you do that at?
At St. Leo University.
At St. Leo.
I did it remotely.
Both of my children both went to New York. You know, that was their first stop. You know, after school and early in their careers, they went to New York. They both spent a number of years there, quite a few years, and it was a great experience, as you can imagine, as you did yourself. What did you learn about leadership in getting your MBA? What type of things did they teach about leadership at that level at that time?
Not much, actually. If you think about the MBA, they're focusing on marketing, and they're focused on statistics and logistics, and teaching you how to do accounting. As far as leadership itself, I think that's more of a hands-on type of experience. I would say I love to research and I love to read articles and sort of those things. So I believe there are some management courses that I can recall, and also some theory courses where it kind of teaches you about the human person characters, type of management, type A, type, you know, and what to watch out for. I did take a couple courses in psychology as electives, which also focused a little bit on that. I would say that my minor in human resources talked more about individuals and how to approach and things like that than my MBA did.
That's interesting. Was there any projects that you put together or that you had to do to get your MBA?
As a team?
As a team?
Yes, so we did a marketing one. That was pretty difficult. And we had to create a company and make it successful as a team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you, how did that work for you? What industry did you choose?
If I remember correctly, we chose music. We couldn't first agree. So we agreed to disagree, and we chose music. But from there, I mean, what I learned from it is that some people are not as involved as you are, right? So some may not take a situation as important as another may. Some are procrastinators, while others want to stay on top of things. So you get to learn really different styles of...
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, my daughter, when she got her MBA, she went to the University of Michigan and got her MBA. One of the things that they were able to do is put together their project, and her company, that they were given a company to put together a program for that company. Hers was in Israel. So part of the process was they flew to Israel to present the plan to them. The whole team did, and they spent a week there and to implement that, which is, you know, those just experiences that myself, I would have rather done it the way you did it, where you had to build something from scratch. And I probably would have tended to be one of the procrastinators. I get things done. It's just I like to wait till the last second and then pressure myself to get it done.
Yeah.
All of the things that you've experienced, I mean, you should be 65 years old with the the life you've led, the New York and here and there, and all the jobs you've had, how would you describe your leadership role right now and your style at North Florida Pediatrics?
So I believe that leadership, you're really focused on the individual, but you need to understand how they learn, what they're needing, what their future is, to try to get that motivation out of them, right? Some people automatically are motivated and they want to, come in and say, hey, I have these plans, and other people are kind of like a little bit shyer, so you really have to read the person and kind of see what would work best for that individual. My leadership style is come to me if you ever need anything. I keep things very private. So I always advise, if there's a concern that you have, always feel comfortable to come speak to me no matter what. I will keep that concern as private as I can. I'm very honest and upfront in a nice professional way. So I think on my end, I feel that the staff really does respect the way that I go about doing things, because they feel comfortable coming to me. And, you hold individuals accountable to an extent, but also understand that, you may be asking someone to do something that may not be their forte, and then therefore you need to guide them. So be very hands-on where possible. I don't see, my title as someone who doesn't go down to the front desk and pick up a phone call, right?
I know that about you, yes.
Yeah. I may be a C.O.O., but first comes first, is our employees and our patients. So, when the staff sees that you're willing to come in and learn what they're doing, then they're more appreciative of, understanding that we're trying to understand all of their difficulties and concerns. But in return, you build that relationship, that connection, and then they're willing to also give back. Yeah.
You have so many layers of egos in the healthcare industry. A lot of disclosure. I get to work with Daisy and the team at North Florida Pediatrics. We meet once a month, and I wish it was more. But we meet once a month and spend a couple of hours together talking about leadership. You have so many egos from doctors and nurses and different people that work in different levels and places, and as you said, such a huge variety of different personality styles. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate the doctor that is treating the nurse practitioner one way and treating the nurses another way, and fighting with other doctors? How do you navigate that?
I would say respect, right, and your approach. For me, I believe it's a skill that you learn the individual just by talking to them, and try to then approach them the way that you feel that they would want to be approached about whatever situation's happening, right? There's going to be times where you have to have difficult conversations, and the way you approach that difficult conversation is going to lay out how that conversation goes, right? So the first words that you pick, how you bring it up, right? There's some things that should be emailed, there's some things that should, be face to face. And then also keeping that conversation private so that they know that they have that freedom to say, okay, this is how I really feel. And then you kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of like why this is happening, right? Because you do have different individuals, and when you have so many different levels working together, there is tension. There's going to be times where not everyone agrees, but it's again finding that midway point where you learn to respect each other and you agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, we have a patient to take care of, right? And just bringing back that concept of like, why are we here and what we're doing and how we're impacting the community. So it's a combination of wearing multiple hats, I would say. I know we had that discussion in the past. but filling out the room when you're walking in to know what hat to wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's such a disparity. You know, in a lot of companies and corporations, there are not a lot of disparity in education. Like when I did work with Northrop Grumman, you know, you're an engineer, you're an engineer. You know, you went through engineering school. They get more into what school did you graduate from? So they're like, well, my school was better than your school. That type of thing, which is really, you know, non-existent in that world. But you're dealing with individuals that maybe barely have a high school education, maybe some college, and then you're dealing with people that have, you know, doctorates, you know, that are medical doctors and have MBAs and different things on top of that. How does that play into a culture fit? How do you bring that culture together as a leader?
I think again we'll be pushing that respect factor. We were all there at one point, right? We all graduated high school. We all had that. You know, at some point we all only had a high school diploma, and it's really respecting that individual may not understand the concept of what an MD may be speaking about, right? But then also respect those roles. So, you know, for me as a professional in operations, I would never go to an MD and try to tell him how to run his clinic, right?
Right.
On a clinical aspect side. But operationally, I may have more experience that will help guide, you know, the way that the clinic should flow, right? The same, you know, an MD can't expect a CNA or CMA to understand specifics, you know, of what's maybe going on medically with a patient, but they expect for them to understand the basics, right?
I gotcha.
So maybe that respect factor of, and also, I mean, I can tell you that at Northward Pediatrics, what I've seen is individuals who love to train, who love to teach, you know, so there isn't anybody that, says, oh, I don't want to put that forth effort towards my nurse, or I don't want, you know, we all, honestly, we talk to each other. We know, you know, how many kids you have at home. We know what personal items are happening. We know if you're usually cheerful and you're upset. We know to come and say, hey, are you okay? You know, and it's not just from leadership, it's from their colleagues. You know, it could be someone from a different department, you know. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down also to that respect factor of respecting our individualities and differences.
You're very fortunate that you get to work with Dr. Sam and Dr. Pam too. Two people that I admire greatly, and I admire them for many, many, many reasons. One of them is they're always trying to improve themselves, and that, you know, sometimes people get to a certain position and then they rest on those laurels, whatever they've built. I always see them pushing themselves to improve, and what totally different personalities too is an amazing thing. What do you enjoy about their leadership style?
You know, for me, Dr. Sam is a brilliant man.
Yeah.
I mean, he has so many different things going on, but, you know, and the same for Dr. Pam. She's very graceful, and, you know, she takes in before she actually speaks, and she tries to understand what's going on. She processes it. But they're both, like you said, so willing to learn and not necessarily cater, but to accommodate, you know, different individualities and try to really help the employees become successful in their vision, you know, because we all have a different vision of what we should be and what our expectations are and our goals are for the future. So they do try to take all of that into consideration, which is amazing.
Yes.
It's not often that you have a president or chief medical officer that are so involved. I mean, Dr. Sam knows everyone, all 140 so employees by name, first name, last name, you know, schedules, everything. It's not often that you see someone that dedicated and that involved. Yeah.
And Dr. Pam is one of those individuals that when she speaks, you listen.
Yes.
You know, and she doesn't talk all the time, you know.
Yeah.
But every time I walk out of that room, that office upstairs, when she has shared things, man, it's like a sponge. You know, you just want to grab all of it. You get to work with a lot of cool professionals there too.
Yeah.
One of my favorite is now more part-time with you, Dr. MJ.
Yeah.
What was it like having Kim as part of your leadership team for so long?
He definitely brings in the hype, you know, he's a character in himself, but he's so happy to, you know, help, and what if we try this and try that, and, you know, he's full of ideas. But he's always willing to also just sit back and listen, you know. So it really just depends. But having him has always been great. You know, he kind of tells you, you know, how he feels about a situation, and he'll come. I mean, he's came to me multiple times for some, you know, guidance or feedback. And we could talk on the phone for an hour about one particular struggle that either one of us may be having, and it's nice having that person to kind of bring up that motivation again. And I think that he's done a lot of that
his enthusiasm and his energy is
yes.
boundless.
Yes.
I mean, it just goes
and especially
on.
with the children. I mean, if you see him in the clinic with the children, and you know, it's really nice to witness.
I used to love stopping in to Live Oak, you know, where he was, and just watch the way he walked around the building.
Yeah,
you know, the way that building is constructed. You know, there's different areas, and you could tell when he was walking through, just because, you know, the kids' faces were just lit up. They could be on their worst day of their lives. And they would see him and their, you know, that smile on their face. So you've made changes, brought in CEO and different things. What is that like when you go through that process of, you know, Dr. Sam passing the torch on to somebody else, and really part of leadership, as you said, it's all about the people. What is it? You know, managing those doubts that some of the people that are not connected to the, you know, information line every day.
Yeah.
How do you manage those attitudes and those thought processes?
I'm a big believer of meeting with individuals regularly, even if it's one-on-one. You know, healthcare is always changing. So if you're going to be in healthcare, you have to be okay between insurances to positions and all that good stuff. I would say with you know, it was a little bit of a shock for everyone, you know, having, you know, always working with Dr. Sam, and, you know, him being there, and he still is, so
Yes, he is.
it's not that he's not. But I always tell the staff is change is okay. You don't have to fear change. You know, focus on what you've been doing. You're doing it well, and that the change slowly, you know, convert to whatever it is going to convert to, right? At the end of the day, the way I've always seen it is you put a good foot in, right? You're doing a good job. You have nothing to worry about, you know, because I know changes are really what causes people to struggle,
Yes.
right? The same thing when I started, you know, there was a lot of changes, you know, from the most simplest things that, oh, well, if we change that, this isn't going to work. But then when you actually create the change and they're like, oh, it did work. Mm-hmm. So I think that them seeing that kind of made the change a little bit smoother, right? But it's just all about perspective.
Now, when you first came on, and I mentioned this early on in the podcast, is you were very instrumental in making a shift, a professionalism shift to that leadership team, because you know, before that there was a lot of people, but not a lot of straight lines. You know, there was squiggly lines, and some areas grayed out, you know, where it wasn't black or white. It was just well, this is the way we've always done it. And you made some incredible shifts there with other people's help. I think of Josh and some of the other people that were there at the time. How do you keep focused on the daily operations while you're making this shift, the way that they do business?
A lot of work and commitment. I would say that, as we were shifting, you have people moving from positions to other positions, and you have like an opening. Honestly, for me, leadership means that if there is a position not filled, that you take on that role, and you make it successful until you bring the right person into that role. Honestly, I don't know. I think for me, I think just so many different experiences have taught me how to multitask. And how to look at things in a specific way. But if it wasn't for the organizations that I have worked for, that I understand how, what are the most efficient processes, right? What's best practice, right? You have best practice operationally, and then you have best practice medically. So it's just a combination of all that, and then really looking at the whole picture. You can't make a change in one department that might affect another. So you have to really go in, such as like a consultant, and really look at everything and how it's operating and what you can change, but it takes time.
Yeah, sometimes we want to put this fire out, but it's better to let that fire burn a little while.
And focus on another.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, you've been able to bring in some of your own people, too, that you brought in and that you work well together with. Is that helpful? I mean, some COOs take over a team and keep that team, together. And you brought in some real key individuals, or they were brought in after you came here. What is that? I mean, what is the difference in leadership from working with somebody else's team or putting together your own team?
Neither really affects me. I would like to say it really just depends on what that leadership team is willing to put in. If that leadership team that I'm arriving into is actively, okay, I have ideas, this is what we're going to do, okay, and willing to accept the changes that are coming so that the company and the organization can continue to grow, then it's an easy transition. It's when you have that pushback that makes it a little bit hard, right? Because having a leadership team is not just about people who are willing to act. You want a leadership team that's willing to say, hey, Daisy, that's not going to work, and this is why, right? You want a leadership team that says, we can't do this.
That evidence, you
Correct,
want the reason.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they are the subject experts. They're doing the job every single day. So if I believe that if you're going to change something, you don't change it, you discuss it. Sometimes, it's easy to make a quick change to just bandage the situation, but the bandage always peels off, and it's easier to really focus on having the right individuals in the key positions that are willing, I as a leader have to accept that, an employee of mine may be like, I don't agree with what you did. And I have to accept that and say, you know what, my apologies, let's talk about it, right? Because I'm always evolving, I'm always learning. And of course, there's times where as a leader, you have to say, hey, I understand what you're saying, but we have to give it a try. Let's give it a try. Let's meet again month, see how it's going. And then if it's not going well, then we tweak a little bit. But I love project management. I love efficiency, so finding ways to improve, but you also have to have the same type of mindset for the rest of your leadership team. As far as working with individuals that I've worked with in the past, I don't typically have really, really close relationships with coworkers or colleagues, mainly professional. So typically if I recommend someone, it's someone that I know has done the job well and is one of those individuals that can focus on what we need to do and who will also speak up and say, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't want to do this, right? You don't want someone that's always going to just say, yes, 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 yes. You want somebody